Welcome to the Hope Show on the road. Okay, so we're going to be discussing joint attention, but really interdisciplinary collaboration and looking at joint attention from our specific scopes of practice, while our observations on cornhole to help facilitate that, but we're not necessarily going to be talking about cornhole specifically. We really want to just look at all the things and understand joint attention a little bit deeply from our points of view, from our experience with clients and just the world in general. So today I have with me Jason, BCBA, Jennifer, speech pathologist, Shelby, occupational therapist, and Kelsey, licensed clinical social worker. So we have a great panel. So I want to kind of start thinking about joint attention and the things necessary. So when we were playing, cornhole, one of the things that we first started talking about was, really why we do it. Why do we engage in games with other people? And specifically, maybe what could be like the function of that? So I don't know, Jason, do you want to kind of talk about just your thoughts? Just what was your thought process?
Sure. So I was watching cornhole out there. I was thinking from a behavioral mindset, and why are we playing cornhole? What's the function of our behavior? And my analysis was it's attention. We want the attention of other people. Would we still be playing cornhole if we're out there by ourselves? And I think not. And also the familiarity with the people. We know each other, and your attention is more valuable to us because of that relationship that we have, and that's going to maintain that activity and make it more reinforcing for us.
Okay. And we also talked about, is there any, there was a couple of Team Casey who are super competitive. And, the argument was whether that was automatic, if you were super competitive and you just went to win. But then I kind of brought up the idea is if you are competitive, are you really competitive if nobody else is there? Not by definition of because you have to compete against somebody else. I guess you could compete against yourself. That's possible. So if you want to try to get better, but really cornhole is really about point. I guess you could go on either side of the thing and play yourself, but you might lose against yourself.
We did also discuss some clients that might just be more maintained by the automatic reinforcement of getting the beanbag in the hole. And they don't really care about the attention aspect of it.
And then thinking about that shift, and as we're, the physical gross motor component about, teaching that. And so as we learn to play and we have to kind of make, these adjustments, but a lot of times we are watching other people. And I know, Shelby, you kind of talked about a recent outing you've had with a client on bowling and thinking about how important joint attention is for being able to, help a client in their desire to do leisure activities. I was thinking about like the client's desire, our clients talk about wanting to play sports, wanting to be on teams, wanting to do these things. And when you think of yourself as a coach, which is essentially an OT is a coach, right. And what all of that needs, what entails in your clinical practice with, following a model and things like that.
So in session, we may build the skills using different techniques, but when it comes time to do the actual occupation, we kind of talked about, hand over hand, it may be efficient or effective, but it's very intrusive. So you step back and use yourself as a model, but in order for me to model, okay, you're going to step with your left foot, throw with your right, if they're not with me, then they're not seeing that movement together. And if they go to step the wrong way or throw something, they're going to throw it way out of the way. I may say whoa and tell them to stop, but if they're not with me again, and we're not jointly engaging, then the skills are not going to be, it's going to be a lot harder to build the skills. So.
And if you think about, we can't really stand up right here, but if you really think about like side by side, if you were, showing someone how to bowl, you're watching side by side to the person, following their footsteps, or insert any sport here, or even cornhole, anything like that, to where, okay, how are you doing that? Oh, I'm flicking my wrist, or whatever. And you're watching that person, and going back to the shared stimulus might be your beanbag for cornhole, but I'm watching Julia's right here. I'm watching Julia. Oh, she's okay, because she's really good. She's hitting it every time. What am I doing wrong? And she's just got this, whatever she's doing that I'm going to try to model, but it's that shift back and forth for me to kind of really be able to learn. So we kind of talked about the implications of my desires of our clients for goals to do these types of things, because relationships is essentially what they desire. And successful ones. So all of those that just really critical to skill for gross motor activities, but also to see that natural reinforcement happening by nailing it. I'm going to be like, yeah, did you see me? Right on. And so as we kind of, another thing that we, thinking about as we're building, that communication, building social communication, which is another goal we're going to talk about, but in that aspect of, when we're building a relationship, we don't know what to talk about. What do we all talk about when there's small talk? What do we?
How's the weather?
The weather. Anything stimulus around us. Like, oh, this is a cool room. Okay, so we're saying random things, but I'm bringing you. Yeah, it is. Oh, cool ceiling. Okay, so we're doing those things, but thinking about, Jennifer, in terms of that. How you're kind of working on helping clients to kind of build language, but language in that social interaction, and why joint attention is important. Do you have anything to say about it?
Well, when Julie and Casey went out and they started to play, they decided to model what it looks like without any joint attention. And so that really was eye-opening, because you realize there is no social interaction. They were each playing their own individual game. There was no teamwork, and nobody was taking turns, and there was no waiting involved, and they weren't referencing each other to get reaction. And so just all of those things are so important to build those social skills that are needed to play games, but to do all kinds of activities.
Yeah, it was awkward. Casey can speak to that. It was very awkward, and I was like, I'm going to hit her probably, but it took me a lot to not shift to her. But I was like, I don't know when she's going, so I'm just going. Because that was if I'm not looking, I'm not checking, for your readiness, my readiness, which is, not necessarily on here for joint attention, but it's that shift that gives us that information of what do I need to do to even play the game properly. So that leads me to thinking about if you don't, and you're kind of missing all of that, all of that information from this shift, is kind of perspective taking, and how much, we really depend on joint attention. That's actually really the foundation. If we're not shifting for joint attention, then we're not going to be able to develop perspective taking, and kind of the implications of that on mental health, on relationships. I don't know if you want to speak to that, Kelsey.
Yeah. So from a mental health perspective, relationships, friendships, how we feel about how other people feel about us is very important. And so without joint attention, we aren't getting that. So for example, the pair that I was observing, I was thinking about, what if one of them had autism and one did not? And so the one that did not is probably, like, just back to what Jason said, you like that attention, you like that competitiveness of playing cornhole, and if you are checking in with that other person, and this person with autism isn't giving you that feedback, they may stop playing with you. They might be like upset, like, this isn't as fun of a game as when I'm playing with someone else. And so it might look like the person with autism leaving the game, not wanting to play with them, and then they internalize that. So the kid with autism is thinking, what did I do wrong? Why don't they play with me? Why don't I have friends? And I hear that a lot in our sessions. It's like, I want to have friends. And that is one of the core skills to have, to make friends. So.
And I see that too, like in that the perspective taking when it comes to misreading people. So not necessarily, that's a great example, but also misreading people and, misinterpreting a situation as they were mean or even beyond that, bullying, because I'm not shifting to see that that actually isn't, you were just being sarcastic. And if I know you really well, I know, oh, it's just Kelsey. If I didn't know Kelsey, I would have to do more work to shift to be like, are you joking? Or is, is this really you? That kind of thing, because I have to do more to read it, what are you actually trying to say? Because your words and your prosody, I'm taking that at face value. And you had a good example of that recently with...
Yesterday, I had a littles client, and he was asking me if he could do something like play with a certain toy, and I took some time to think about it before I answered, and he wasn't looking at my facial expressions, and so without me saying anything, he internalized that and said, I'm sorry you're mad at me, or sorry if I made you mad. And I, it kind of caught me off guard, because I wasn't upset, but there was no looking at my nonverbals. He could have maybe just picked up on just me not answering, and then that was what made him think that I was upset with him. Or it could have just been something, maybe he noticed something in my facial expression, like me thinking, and I'm like,
Yeah, because your eyebrows just went like that.
Yes.
And I've actually had that a long-time client would always be like, but your eyebrows are like this, and that's a mad face. But you make your eyebrows like that for lots of reasons. And so if I'm not kind of shifting to say, okay, what is the context? It's always, there's a shared stimulus, but sometimes the shared stimulus isn't anything you can see. Because if it's like, okay, what were we talking about? What's the context? And you're like, the context is I just asked a question, since she might be thinking that I'm shifting. But if I can't shift, or I'm not shifting because I'm not reading the nonverbal, then I may be left to think, oh no. And it could have been my history of being punished or whatever from doing that, and that's exactly what the person was mad, or I missed it, or whatever it may be. There are experiences that led them to assume the negative. And that's what we see a lot more is, well, I kind of see the both sides. I see either everyone hates me and everyone's mad at me, but I also see is everybody is my friend. On the flip side. And so not being able to read that that person is not your friend. Just because we're talking about a shared thing, but your face could be totally making fun of me. And you're being very unkind, but I've missed that because, the rule is we have things in common, and we're talking about the weather, and it's great. It's going great. So misreading that prosody, things like that. But that shift and that joint attention is the foundation to show us what is intent. What is that person's perspective? That is how we get more information. That's how we put all of the social experience together. And so without that kind of leaves just a hole. And with that strong desire to do things with others, to engage, to have friends, have relationships, have significant others, that's why we kind of feel like joint attention is such a lot of the goals that we have all kind of intertwine, but that is such a really big piece to where I see breakdown happening in those areas. So, yes.
On that, I'm sure as most of us have already gathered this, but basically what you're describing is that this is the ultimate behavioral test. Because without it, nothing. You're not going to learn those nonverbal cues. Without learning about nonverbal cues, you're not going to learn from a model. without all of that, you're not going to build relationships. So from a behavioral perspective, it is the ultimate, besides co-regulation. But
Thanks for sharing that joint attention is the ultimate behavioral cusp. If you didn't hear that. Anyone else have any questions or thoughts? Jake?
I was just thinking, like, not from like a behavioral, the therapy side of things, but like when clients go into like another session with another interdisciplinary team, you aren't targeting any of their deficits, but like how do you take that whole big picture, knowing like just like giving the general philosophy, how does that affect like what you guys do individually? Like your kids don't come in and do not targeting but how do you kind of juggle all of that?
I think what Jake is asking is since those specific goals that we do in ABA, so if they have ABA goals of joint attention for skill acquisition, but that's not necessarily your target. You might have a target, gross motor, fine motor, whatever that may be. You might have articulation, things like that, and then you might be working on anxiety or depression. What Jake, I think, is asking is how are you thinking about those things, because you're not necessarily targeting joint attention, but maybe an example of how you kind of think about, without this skill, how do I kind of bridge that gap?
Yeah, so if I'm using a game of some sort to address gross motor, fine motor, bilateral coordination, if it's my turn and I lose the client and they're looking at a different thing in the room, they've realized the yoga ball is sitting over there and now their attention has shifted to that, but I'm still over here by myself, I either have to get their attention back with me because now it's their turn, or I go and join them and now we're both, again, joint attention on the yoga ball. We may do something for a minute and then it's like, oh yeah, we were over here doing what we're doing. So without joint attention, especially when we're just the only two in the room, it makes it really hard if we can't parallel play, we can't really build skills. So,
and Kelsey, you probably just have to, you have the opportunity a little bit in your sessions to kind of, process that. Yes. So that's what's great about social work. Is we can go, that's a whole nother goal. Is okay, how are you let's process why you think I'm mad, and making sure that gets repaired. And then it's kind of then note to self, that's interesting. Now I'd have to, next time with that client, you'd have to kind of make the adjustment to know that that pause may or may not have been the reason, or your eyebrows or your face might have been the reason that they misunderstood, or them not looking at all. So having to compensate.
Sometimes those things being brought up can help know that maybe we need to take a step back too. And so maybe we are focusing on a goal that needs to be later down the road. Maybe we need to step back and do facial expressions, and talking about how eyebrows being kind of down like that could mean that somebody's upset, but it also could mean maybe somebody's confused, or maybe somebody's waiting or thinking. So yeah, it's a big part of it.
Mm-hmm. Which speech, I think you guys spend a lot of time also doing that aspect of, the nonverbal, which we're going to talk about social communications. I don't want to get into social communication, but it's great. Any other questions? Thoughts?
I just wanted to say it's really nice that we have such a multidisciplinary, collaborative approach, because I can contact Kelsey for mental health concerns if I have a client that's really avoidant of an activity like this because they perceive failure in a competitive game, and some of those things are like outside of my scope as a behavior analyst, and it's really nice to be able to talk about those kind of things. In ABA school, we don't talk about feelings a whole lot.
What? Yes. And I think even too, I think about, and I tried to talk to people when we were thinking about zone of proximal development and their ZPD is going to OT as well, because thinking about if you're actually playing and they're shutting down, but they're saying like, I hate this, is stupid, and not realizing that it's difficult for them to have like trunk, I'm making this up, bilateral coordination, and that is the thing, and I'm not even realizing that I'm taking for granted they can't cross the midline. And we're looking at, it's like there's this, maladaptive behavior happening when it's something as simple as that, as motor planning. And that's why it's just really, really key to be talking about.
This is a comment off of Jake's question, but that's the benefit of our center and the interdisciplinary, because we can work on these little tiny things, and then you guys can work on your big things, but it all just kind of comes together.
Mhm.
In a different setting, you're going to have outpatient, you're going to have, you guys are outpatient,
Right.
you're going to have all these other things, but nobody's really working together, like off of each other and building off of each other like we are able to do it.
Right. We could make so much more gains when we're all working together. So thank you. Thank you all.
Thank you.